This is Seven Seas Cruising Association, and this is the webinar for why use a broker, selling smart, buying smarter, and why surveys matter. We have Curtis Stokes and Associates, Yacht Brokerage, with Mr. Stokes presenting the best ideas, the best practices for yacht surveys and for your brokerage partners. We'll be starting at 7 o'clock. This is Seven Seas Cruising Association. This is our best practice webinar with Curtis Stokes. He's in Seattle presenting over his device there, and we'll talk about how to use a broker, why use a broker, selling smart, buying smart, and why surveys matter. SSCA is providing this information in this webinar for education and informational purposes only. SSCA and the present presenters make no warranties or representations regarding the accuracy, completeness, or reliability, use of information, and at your own risk, always verify findings. SSCA does not endorse information may be or may change without notice. And by attending, SSCA is not liable for session content as discussed. This is our legal disclaimer with our attorney. I'd like to introduce Curtis. Curtis, are you, Curtis is online.
I am.
Curtis is the founder and yacht broker of Curtis Stokes and Associates. Decades of hand-on experience. They're licensed, they're bonded. They specialize in worldwide yacht sales, charters, and new construction. Keep that in mind. They have deep market knowledge. They guide on surveys, evaluations, and due diligence. And let me tell you, that's critical right now. They serve the Great Loop, a cruising community on both sides of the United States. He's on the West Coast right now. He'll be back in Virginia probably tomorrow. They have ethics. They have a commitment to ethics. They are honest. They're always putting their clients first. And I will tell you, I have called him with boat issues, not just mine, but other members' issues, even non-member issues. And he's been very honest to step up and help. They have standards and professional accountability, and that counts. I can't tell you how many times someone gets a boat and they have buyer's regret. Using a broker, using a valued partner makes a big difference. And they have built a long-term relationship on trust and respect. So, Curtis, having said that, I'm going to turn this over to you. Why use a broker? And let you cover some of the topics we have, which are buying and selling, um, surveys, and the current market. Curtis.
Sure. Well, thank you, Joan. And it's good to be here. And thank you, everyone, for attending. Joan, jump in if I miss anything that you want to cover. But from memory, by the way, I'm in Anacortes, Washington right now on business. And I've stolen my wife's laptop because mine crashed. But I understand I have some really good recipes on this that I'd possibly sell too, in addition to boats. So I haven't looked at them yet, but apparently they're pretty good. So, yacht brokerage. Let's start with the seller side. You were asking me previously, what is the most common thing that comes up on surveys for sellers? And unquestionably, it is condition issues. A lot of sellers say to me when we're going into a survey, well, my boat is in excellent condition. We're not going to have any problem today. And then by the end of the survey, I see this deer in the headlights look when the surveyors pick their boat apart. And there are just things that none of us know about. We don't have the equipment or the talent or the experience to survey boats like some of the more senior surveyors that are out there, and they'll come up with things like moisture in the coring and stringers on deck, and some delamination here and there, all kinds of things right down to mechanical issues. Most buyers these days are hiring a mechanical surveyor, an engine surveyor, and a hull surveyor, both. So they're seeing things that you normally, as a seller, wouldn't see. On my boats, I don't see them, and in our homes, we don't see them because we're there every day seeing the same thing, versus these people having a fresh set of eyes. And the problem for sellers too is that the makeup of most buyers today are that they've never owned a boat before, or they've only owned, maybe a Sunfish or, a Laser many years ago, and they are reaching retirement or have just retired and they want to get into boating, and they're looking at your, 1982 Catalina 42 or something, and they're working with a surveyor who's now telling them, well, the rigging is over 10 years, so insurance wants the rigging to be 10 years or newer. So, well, gee, how much is that going to cost? And the cost ends up being, close to the value of some of these older boats. I can tell those of you who own older, mid 80s to 70s production boats like, the Endeavors and the CNCs and the Catalinas and the Hunters and all from back then, that even the donation companies are backing off accepting them as donation, solely because they have so many of them that they're having a hard time getting them sold and clearing out their docks. Right now, the Maritime Museum in St. Michael's, Maryland, is having a spring sailboat sale where they've dropped the prices on all the donated sailboats because they have so many and they just can't take anymore. So that's kind of a state of the market. And that's what sellers are facing, in the buyers, and their expectations, sometimes unrealistic. And then depending on the surveyors, I'm also seeing a lot of senior surveyors retiring and new surveyors coming in who may not have quite the experience of the senior surveyors, and making mistakes or making observations that may not necessarily be 100% correct or help the situation. So, the seller's side, I'm at this point, I'm recommending that a lot of sellers hire a surveyor before they put their boat on the market. You don't need a full pre-purchase survey with a haul out and a trial run and everything. But even as simply as talking to a surveyor about coming on board and just previewing the boat for you, running a moisture meter and a phenolic hammer through wherever they can access stringers and around the decks, chain plates, what's the access like, just giving you a perspective from a surveyor standpoint before you put your boat on the market. Because honestly, I sit with sellers and tell them these things that I see, and they go, yeah, okay, well, but you're the broker and you just want, a brand new boat for this price. No, I just want to get your boat sold for you. And I don't want survey issues causing you to have 3 or 4 surveys, which has happened in the last year. Last fall, in October, November, we had 10 surveys back to back fall through because of condition issues. That's a record. I've never seen that in my whole career. And it was a combination of sellers not maintaining their boats properly, and or enough to the expectations of the inexperienced buyers. So there's a combination there, along with a slow sales market. So really think about the condition issues, things that you've put off, and get that independent opinion from a surveyor who, really will open your eyes to some of the issues that are going to come up on survey. A lot of sellers these days bought their boat during COVID and paid top dollar. Everybody had to. That was the market. Well, we're in a different market now. So a lot of sellers are gasping at the market analysis that we're doing on their boats, and really wanting higher prices for their boats and ending up asking those higher prices. It's frustrating for them. They're taking longer to sell because of that. So the sellers really need to rethink the pricing on a lot of the boats that are on the market, in addition to the condition issues. For sellers, also, location can come into play. The more remote you are, the less activity you're going to have. I tell sellers if you base your boat in Fort Lauderdale, Annapolis, Newport, you're going to have the most activity because there's so many brokers based in those yachting bases, and they're out showing boats and they're looking on their iPad or on their phone. The buyers are doing the same thing, and they're like, "Oh, look at this! Here's this sailboat. Why don't we go and see if we can see it?" So I get calls last minute from brokers who are out showing boats in those areas. The problem is, of course, the dockage is outrageously expensive in those areas, especially depending on the season. So you want to back off of those areas and try to find reasonable dockage when you put your boat up for sale in neighboring towns and cities that are more affordable. The Let's take Fort Lauderdale for example. Going to Dania or going to um, you know, Boca somewhere further up north, or even going up to Stewart and Fort Pierce. Those areas are still close enough for people to fly in, see your boat, and get back to the airport. Jacksonville, Georgia, Brunswick, Georgia are excellent places. Brunswick, Georgia, because of insurance restrictions, oftentimes. And then Jacksonville, because of the airport there, and on the Ortega River, you can get some dockage out at Fernandina Beach and things like that, at Tiger Point and places where you're close to the airport, or the buyers are close to the airport, in and out, and they can go, and there's some brokers in the area. So think about location. In saying that, I'm flying to Aruba on Saturday to show one of my listings to a family that are going to be there on vacation, but are looking to purchase a sailboat in the Caribbean. So we sailed or we fly to St. Martin, we fly to St. Thomas, we fly to Aruba, places like that, Panama, uh, major bases, rather than somewhere really remote. Like I'm going to pick on St. Vincent. I've spent a lot of time there. A little harder to get to, a little more expensive for buyers. I even have buyers reluctant to even travel to the Bahamas to see boats, unfortunately. So you have to make it easy for the buyers. So location, pricing, condition, and just what your expectations are important. On the buyer side, expectations are the same thing. We had a sale fall through today, and the buyer's main complaint was the boat was dirty. It was in the north where the water had not been turned on yet to clean the boat, but they were anxious to survey the boat. And the items that came up on survey, some were reasonable, and the seller needed to address them. But when we heard, because the boat was dirty, that's unrealistic expectations, especially in the situation. So the buyers really need good guidance. They need to really study who they hire as a surveyor. Some surveyors can be alarmists. Some just purposely miss things to help the buyers get their boat that they want. You want somebody that's acting as a consultant, that's going to really guide you into making the right decisions, and allow you to participate in the survey. Let the broker, if there's a broker involved, coordinate all the details. I see some buyers that want to be in control and are very excited, and they haven't done this before. So the boat yard isn't scheduled in tune with the surveyor on timing for the haul out. Um, the seller, is not in on the same page. Let the broker who does this day in, day out, handle that, all the details for the survey if possible. And if your broker's not doing that, there's something wrong. They should have the experience to know to do that. So the buyers, get your consultants. Whatever you do, please survey every boat. Do not cut corners and buy a boat without a survey, or just look at it yourself, or bring a friend along. These surveys are so critical to keeping you out of a money pit. And there are loads of boats out there that are really just, they may look good on the surface, but they do have issues that your surveyor is going to come up with that you're going to miss. Even the price of an auxiliary, having to replace an auxiliary, or if it's big enough to have a generator, you're still talking about a lot of money here to replace those if you don't do your proper due diligence. Yes, it's a lot of money for the survey. The typical pre-purchase survey is about $34 a foot. The engine survey is about the same amount, but they usually charge a flat fee. I highly recommend both. Unless it's an older sailboat with, maybe an old Beta or an old Westerbeek, um, on a, 80s, 70s boat, the cost of the engine surveyor might not justify it in most cases. But on some of these newer boats, there's a lot of money sitting there. So really do your due diligence, as a buyer. Um, you really need to make sure that your surveyor is a member of SAMS or NAMS, the Society of Accredited Marine Surveyors organization, or the National Accredited Marine Surveyors organization. Most lenders and insurers require them to be a member. Remember, there is no certification or qualification for anyone to call themselves a surveyor. But if they're a member of one of those two organizations, they're held to a higher degree. They have an ethics board, they have ongoing training, and they're just making the effort that someone else might not. And again, your lender insurer may not accept their survey report, so when you hire a surveyor, run it by your insurance broker to make sure, that they are going to be covered or accept their survey report. Um, Joan, what did I miss? Anything else that you can think of that I need to highlight on, and then, leave it to questions and answers? Are you there? Hopefully Joan rejoins us.
Can you hear me?
Now I can hear you.
Okay. This is a new version of Zoom, Curtis. I apologize.
No
And
worries.
um, so you prepared your boat for a survey. You're a seller. You prepared your boat for the survey. Um, you've done due diligence. You've fixed everything. Should you have the surveyor come back, or how do you make sure that you're not going to get dinged if you have a lot of things to fix?
Well, you mean after the survey, if
Yeah.
the deal is contingent on the seller fixing things?
Yeah.
That's up to the buyer. And the way I write, so you can accept, a buyer can accept a boat, reject a boat, or do what we call a conditional acceptance. They accept it conditional upon the seller fixing something or reducing the price to reflect that there were survey issues. If the buyer is asking the seller to repair things, normally the way I write it when I'm representing a buyer is buyer and seller agree, seller will repair the inoperable uh, anchor windlass to buyer's satisfaction prior to closing. That way, the buyer can arrange for their surveyor to come back and reinspect the anchor windlass in that case, or they can get their broker to, or somebody can come back before closing and just make sure that the repair was done properly. I normally like the buyer to take control of the repairs so that we know it's done correctly. If it's an inexperienced buyer, they oftentimes are reluctant to do that. They want to just let the seller handle that and stay out of it. I understand that, but we're out of control on it if the seller handles it. And the seller could cut corners. That you hope that they're honest and ethical and they're going to do it right. And just if you do that, make sure your surveyor is the one that inspects it and gets it right. I just sold a boat in Anacortes where we had a leaking shaft seal, and they had to do about 4 trial runs to get it fixed. They had about 2 or 3 haul outs to replace shaft seals to get it right. And the buyer kept sending her surveyor back, to reinspect over and over and over again. She was getting really frustrated with the cost of it. But as I pointed out to her, don't accept that boat in that condition. Make sure your surveyor either accepts the repair or just let's reject it and walk away and keep looking. In the end, she bought the boat because the surveyor was able to confirm that the seller had finally fixed it properly. Seller wasn't trying to cut corners or anything. They were very honest and they were very frustrated, but these things happen. It was just a fluke, and they've really struggled to get it properly repaired. So that's, an example of some of the things that go on. But the buyer, is the one that would have something re-inspected. If the seller has a surveyor visit the boat ahead of time before putting it on the market, there's no need to have the surveyor come back if the seller has somebody properly repair whatever items they chose to repair from that initial preview by their surveyor, if you will.
And you could point people to surveyors that you've worked with to help, no matter where our boat is. You could suggest the surveyors that you have worked with that you know are well legitimate or experienced, correct?
Well, so that's a touchy one because my personal opinion, and most brokers, are like this. I don't recommend surveyors
Okay.
because I feel it's a conflict of interest. My commission is based on whether this sale goes through. So I want the surveyor to be completely independent so that there's no question about our integrity and honesty about any transaction. I can give a buyer the names and contact information of, say, 3 or 4 hull surveyors, engine surveyors, let the buyers interview them. And by interview them, speaking to them personally over the phone, you can ask others, for recommendations on forums, in Facebook, in groups, get the feedback. If you see the same name come up over and over, more than likely that is a well-respected surveyor, pretty obviously. But any seller or broker that recommends a surveyor, be very wary of that. The other thing is, do not bother asking for old surveys. People do it all the time. Brokers offer, survey available, and they really shouldn't because the buyer of that surveyor owns that survey, not the seller, unless they sold it to them. And then they do have the authority to use it. But that survey, even if it's a day old, is outdated. Something could have happened to that boat between the end of the survey and whenever time it is that you're discussing this boat. Um, some things could have been fixed, some things might not have. Those that were fixed might not have been done correctly. So to me, it's just kind of misinformation, gives you a false sense of security. People say, well, at least I get an idea of what came up. Yeah, it came up then, but will it come up now because it was repaired or it was a mistake by the surveyor? You might pass on a boat where a surveyor says this is a problem when in fact it really wasn't. I've had surveyors who copy and paste from other surveys and they'll say this is a twin screw power boat when it's actually a single screw trawler. I mean, they do make mistakes and they do rush sometimes. So I see survey reports with mistakes in them quite regularly. I'm not bashing surveyors. I'm just saying they make mistakes occasionally. So don't ask for old surveys. Do your own due diligence. Um, you could even, as a buyer, hire a surveyor to do a preliminary. Like I said, for the seller, just go and preview the boat in quickly, and pay them less money for the initial visit, and then decide whether you're going to continue with the main survey at more cost.
That's very helpful, Curtis, because many of us, I've never sold a boat. I don't know that I'm going to sell a boat, but um, many of us haven't sold a boat, or some of us may be looking at buying a boat. Now, you screen buyers. Um, if I was hiring you as an agent for myself to sell a boat, then you're doing one aspect. If I was going to be the having you as an agent for me while I was purchasing a boat, how does that differ?
So you have listing brokers who represent the seller. You have selling brokers or buyer brokers that represent the buyer. And then you have dual agency. Dual agency is where a broker represents both parties. Some people don't feel comfortable with that. Some people do. Some people feel that the broker has to have a fiduciary relationship with one party or the other. I get that, but I also see in practice day after day where, let's say, I use the example quite often of I'm representing a buyer. I submit an offer on another broker's listing. Let's say it's $140,000 asking price. My buyer submits, $100,000 offer. The listing broker calls me and says, "Okay, the seller counters your offer at 130,000. But if you can get me, between you and me, if you can get me 120,000, we've got a deal, I believe." Now, how is that representing the seller's best interest? That broker, that listing broker, was solely interested in earning a commission and putting a deal together. I hear that all the time. I call up my buyer and I say, "Hey, guess what? The listing broker just told me that he wasn't supposed to tell me." And so then we have that inside knowledge that we shouldn't have had, and it's not fair to the seller. When I represent both parties as a dual agent, which I do quite often, I make it clear to everybody that I am representing both parties. I'm not going to beat up either party. I'm giving sold comparables, the same sold comparables that I give a seller, I'm giving to a buyer. I'm being completely transparent on the information that I'm given. Obviously, if the seller tells me there are any issues on the boat, I tell people regardless whether I represent both or one or whatever. But also, I make it clear that if the buyer wants to discuss something with me that he or she does not want told to the seller, that's what I do. I keep it between us. If the buyer says, "I want you to communicate this to the seller," that's what I do, and vice versa for the seller side. So I'm a transactional agent in that case where I'm just trying to help two parties come together and come to a meeting of the minds. And if we can, great. If we can't, no hard feelings. Everybody goes their separate ways, and we keep looking for another boat, and we keep trying to sell the other boat.
So you facilitate, and you're professional. You have professional listings, and it's more than just the listing of the boat. You do a lot more when you're working with a seller, and you do something similar for the buyer. Um,
Well, for the seller, let's talk about that in the marketing in today's market. Um, so, on the seller side, you want a brokerage firm and a broker that obviously are experienced and have the budget to advertise your boat in multiple places, especially on the internet today, because that is where everybody's going. Whether it's Facebook Marketplace, boosting ads, you can put an ad on Facebook Marketplace, but you really need to spend the money to boost it. And that can be quite expensive depending on how much you boost it as a broker or as a seller. The now companies cannot advertise on Facebook Marketplace. So what I have done is our individual brokers use their Facebook Marketplace or Facebook account to advertise our listings on Facebook, and then we reimburse them their advertising costs. Otherwise, we pay for all the advertising as a company. There are loads and loads of search sites like Yacht World, Yachtar, um, Marine Source, Right Boat, sailboat listings, Sail Trader, Yacht Site. And every week I get inundated with emails from people touting their new website that it's the latest and greatest search engine for yachts and boats and that it's different than everybody else. What I just had happen about 2 weeks ago now that's very important, and it has to do with AI. And I know you're big on AI, but there are so many scams coming out. You have to be so careful about this, everybody. So I got an inquiry from a brokerage firm I had never heard of, and a guy named AJ who said he had a buyer interested in one of my listings. And I know better than to click on the link to the website, to see his website. So I typed it in, went to the website. And what I noticed was I had looked at one previously to this that said a lot of the same things. We are different. We are a new brokerage. we're transparent, we're honest, we're ethical. It was all that gobbledygook that, was on this website, just like the last one. Then I noticed there were no bios. There was no information about individual brokers or the owner of the company, no personal email address to anyone, no mobile number. There was just one phone number and one email. And quickly realized that somebody had created this website through AI as a scam, and the one before that. And so I'm anticipating I'm going to see more and more of this. So be very careful about, what websites you visit, and who you use. Um, I predicted that with the slow economy, there would be fewer brokers. There would be some consolidation. Sure, there've been a few who have retired and said, "Okay, I'm done." And then there are just so many new brokers. I've never seen anything like it. Every time I turn around, there's another new brokerage firm, new brokers. Some of them I know and they've gone out on their own. They're very legitimate, and some just, have come out of the blue from a different industry. They're more social media type people. They're using social media to establish their credibility, even though they don't have a lot of experience in boating. So you really have to do your due diligence. The other thing is, on a brokerage firm for sellers, you want to dig down and find out, how are they marketing? Are they doing boat shows just because they've always done boat shows? We've always done it this way, so why would we change? Are they advertising on Yacht World because they've always been on Yacht World and because people think that you have to be on Yacht World? Yacht World is owned by a private equity firm that has been flipped several times, and it's just a money maker for the private equity firms, in my opinion. They have not invested in their software, as far as I'm concerned. It's antiquated. It's frustrating. I, over the years, have received complaint after complaint after complaint from buyers who are frustrated with the software on Yacht World. They start there and then they leave there and go to other websites to find a better website that they prefer. So Yacht World, prior to this whole private equity thing going on, and COVID and all that, had about 200,000 listings on it. They got down to about 60,000, and right now they're hovering around 80,000. But what I've noticed on searching it on it is that there are all kinds of duplicates and triplicates of the same boat. I counted one boat when I searched for, I think it was a trawler of some type. I saw it 5 times. So that is going into that 80,000. So in my opinion, Yacht World probably only has about 38 to 40,000 legitimate listings. Right Boat, the last time I checked, had about 34 to 35,000 listings. So all the different websites have a number of different listings on them. And unfortunately, because of the whole Yacht World fiasco, where they're raising rates dramatically on brokers, many brokers have left, like I did 3.5 years ago, but they've scattered to a bunch of different websites. So we're all, buyers and brokers, are now having to search 4, 5, 6 different websites just to find all the boats for sale. Very frustrating. We used to be able to just go to Yacht World, everything was on there, that was it. You cannot just go to Yacht World and expect your boat to sell or find a boat, because there are a lot of boats that aren't on there anymore. So you've got to look at all these other websites, unfortunately. The other thing is that I found over the years that we were getting fewer and fewer inquiries from Yacht World, and Boat Trader was staying about the same. But when I matched them up with the actual buyers for our boats, none were coming from Boat Trader. And I was pretty shocked about that. My ad agency made me really analyze that. And that's what I found. I make all our brokers register their leads in a lead registration website that creates it into a spreadsheet and then a graph, and then matches with the buyers' names so we can see where buyers are actually coming from. Look for brokers, and I'm not saying I'm the only one who does this. Look at other brokers and how they market. They don't just throw money at a particular website and say they're on it just to get your listing, but that they're actually proactive and trying different things. events like SSCA. Is your broker showing up and displaying there or sponsoring it? If you're into trawlers going to the dark side, MTOA, the Marine Trawler Owners Association, is your broker there supporting them, sponsoring it? Things like that. You can't just throw something on the internet and hope it's going to sell. That's what most people do these days, but that's not just the only way. So you've got to have a broker who's engaged and displaying your listing at events in person. Unfortunately, the boat shows, in my opinion, have become very ineffective. If you go to Fort Lauderdale or Miami or Palm Beach or Annapolis, you're looking at almost all brand new boats or mega yachts. And if you're a buyer for one of those, that's great. Or if you want to buy a chamois or buy, a beer, that's okay too. But to find brokerage boats that are affordable, it's getting more and more difficult. And to be fair with them, their costs have skyrocketed, so we can't afford to put boats in these shows like we used to many years ago. So a lot of brokers no longer do that, just the dealers and the manufacturers. So, that's for the sellers, and discussing how to deal with a broker and choose a broker. For the buyer brokerage, this is important. A lot of brokers call themselves buyer brokers. In my opinion, they're not. There are a lot of brokers that will ask the listing broker to do what we call a courtesy showing. So you want to see a boat in Texas, your buyer broker is in Maryland. The buyer broker doesn't want to travel to Texas to show you the boat. And so they ask the listing broker to show it to you. The value of that buyer broker and their experience is with them there showing you things on that boat, pointing things out. This is good. This is bad. Have you thought about this? Does this work for you? Take a deep breath. What do you think about this? I know you love this boat, but what do you really think in practical terms? If you're there on your own with a listing broker, all the listing broker wants to do is sell you that boat so they can get their listing sold. Your buyer broker is supposed to be there with you, representing you. A real buyer broker will also travel ahead of time to a boat and preview it for you and report back to you the condition, anything they find out by visiting it. They'll do a virtual showing for you on FaceTime or WhatsApp, so that you don't waste a lot of time and money traveling to boats that may not be as they are presented to be on the internet or in a magazine, as many of us have learned the hard way. So we eliminate that if we go there first and go, this boat is not as presented, so don't even waste your trip coming in there. And then, of course, the buyer broker takes you through the whole process, from the contract with the escrow account for your deposit and your purchase funds, and helping you with the survey process, the scheduling, and then the closing process, and being available afterwards to help you. I help buyers with training captains, finding contractors, whatever I can do to help, in their ownership of the boat, as other brokers do also. One thing about escrows, remember that the only states that require a license is California, Florida, and Virginia. Other states do not require the individual salespeople to be licensed, and many states don't require the brokerage firm to be licensed and bonded. So Maryland requires the brokerage firm, but not the individual agents. So you could be putting your money in an escrow account that is not bonded in a particular state, and that broker doesn't have a license where somebody can go after their license. So really, do your due diligence and don't assume anything in the yacht brokerage business, in the surveying business, in the closing business.
Curtis, we have a question, but before that, I'd like to circle back these websites, um, the kind of fake maybe websites, but they can use, like you said, AI to make a good presentation. Have you seen them creating fake boat images to help sell a boat?
Absolutely. And what's also scary, I heard two brokers talking recently, last year, about AI after an AI presentation. And one said to the other, I use AI all the time. And they're like, okay, yeah, so do I. Yep. I don't even go to the boat anymore. I just plug it in, and off we go. And I just stopped what I was doing and I looked up in shock and I was like, you don't visit a boat when listing it? And they were like, well, yeah, why? I mean, we've got all the information here with AI. And I'm like, oh my God.
Oh no.
So,
Oh no.
you know, it just, I get it. You know, AI is a wonderful tool, but maybe I'm showing my age, but I kind of like, you know, old school show up like I'm doing here in Anacortes listing a boat and seeing it in person and taking all the specs and photos and video. And there are plenty of other brokers that do that too, but just be wary of the whole new world we're in.
Now, Neil Cabot has a question. He wants to go back to the discussion of dual agency
Okay.
and ask how common is that across all the deals you work on? What percentage are you a seller broker, buyer's broker, or dual agent?
Uh, Probably at least half of our sales, we are the dual agent because we promote buyer brokerage so much that we represent a lot of buyers and we're a larger firm with a lot of listings. And so the buyers will end up buying a boat that we have listed. We don't push the buyers towards our listings. It's just the boat that they choose. And I oftentimes encourage my buyers to tell me boats that they're interested in more than me giving them boats so that there's no appearance of me sending a bunch of my listings to them or any of my listings to them. I try to send other brokers listings to even it out, you know, as long as they are suitable for that buyer. Um, but you know, we spend about 500,000 a year in advertising, so we get a lot of listings, we sell a lot of listings. We go out of our way to cooperate with other brokers as far as every one of our listings are available for co-brokerage. We never disallow co-brokerage like some brokers. It drives me absolutely insane when one broker that's well known refuses to co-broke on their listings for the first 30 days, hoping that they'll sell it in house. And I just, you know, what good is that doing the seller? The seller doesn't know that's going on. It's just outright, you know, unethical and not fair to the seller. So sellers, make sure your broker is putting the boat on the market right away, cooperating with all other brokers, regardless of how experienced they are or whether they like them or not. You know, because buyers are working with buyer brokers quite a bit these days, and you know, I have brokers calling me all the time representing buyers, and by all means, bring them on. You know, sell my listings. Absolutely. Let's work together.
So that kind of narrows the field a little bit with some of what you've been talking about. You can narrow the field, for at least for buyers, narrow the field. You can take a look at a boat and say, you know, that they come in there with a little piece of paper. I like this boat. What about it? You could find red flags, um, and that just traveling to get a boat, to look at a boat, you can narrow down that because that's a big cost. Um,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why we promote it so much because we've heard so many complaints from people who traveled long distances and were so frustrated with boats that were offered by sellers and offered by brokers that weren't as they were presented to be. And it was a complete waste of time. We're trying to eliminate a lot of that.
so you advertise your sellers' boats on the web. You probably use Instagram accounts, you use Facebook, um, some video, anything that's working. It's kind of a hybrid right now, I think.
YouTube,
Some of the
yeah,
websites.
YouTube is very important. I don't use TikTok, but I use YouTube. Um, and everybody's got a different philosophy. Mine on videos is I just take the raw video. I walk through the boat. There's no music. I don't stand and talk about here's the galley, here's the head, here's the stateroom. I just show it as it is so that when you visit the boat, there are no surprises. What you see in the video is what you're going to see when you get there in person. Others like to entertain. I get it. That's fine. Some people, you know, contact me and say, I love your video. It just gives me what I want to see. And others say, dude, come on, give me some music, entertain me, and I'm like, are you really out to buy a boat or just be entertained? But everybody wants something different, and that's fine. That's why you need to pick a broker, that you feel comfortable with and have some similarities, if you will, or just feel comfortable they're what you are looking for.
So you covered surveys and surveyors, SAMs being important. Depends on what you're going to be doing. Um, your insurance company probably that you're planning to use will require the kind of surveyor type and credentials for insuring the boat. Um, if I was going to do a survey for insurance purposes, though, because you do it every 3 years on our boat or 2 years, out of the water and ABYC and SAMs, um, how do you can you help people with that as
What do
a
you,
if as a if we had
yeah,
you
sorry, for
yeah
some reason we had a loud buzzing sound. Are you there?
yes
Okay, sorry.
could you could you help say I was that I needed to do a heavy duty insurance survey, say I was going to donate my boat. I'm not doing that, but donate my boat somewhere and I needed a certain type of survey and I wanted to be sure that I was doing everything right because it's a big deal. um, you could help us if we hired you to be our agent, correct? Or did I lose you?
Yeah, so I mean, there are several types of service. Can you hear okay, Jeff?
Yeah, we seem to be breaking up a bit.
Yeah, a little bit there. I think I hear you okay now. Joan?
So, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, sorry, you're kind of fading in and out. I'm not sure if it's me or you guys or what, but I'm going to assume you can hear me. So you have
Yes.
insurance surveys, you have pre-purchase surveys where buyers have to have a pre-purchase survey to get insurance, a pre-purchase and valuation survey. A seller does an insurance survey to get their insurance renewed. It's not as detailed as the pre-purchase survey. And on the insurance survey, a lot of surveyors are really trying to help you get your insurance renewed. So they're, unless it's something that is a safety item or a major structural item, they typically will not make a big to do about it on an insurance survey. They're not going to get into the varnished rails not being, properly varnished or a light bulb out. There might be one out there or a couple out there that'll do that type of thing, but that's not really what the insurance survey is looking for. It's looking for life-threatening, structural, mechanical. Is this boat a seaworthy boat and a good uh, risk for the insurance company? Um, so it's not as detailed. Most insurance surveys, a lot of them will not require a haul out or a trial run. Some will. It depends on the insurance company. But the insurance is the biggest obstacle to buying a boat right now. And this is something sellers are struggling with as much as anyone because a seller who bought their boat 10 years ago has had insurance regularly, renewed it a couple times, isn't facing the same market that a buyer is. And again, a lot of buyers are very inexperienced buyers trying to buy a bigger boat than they can get insurance for. And the insurance companies are balking because of the major losses that that ship that went down in Brunswick, Georgia, near St. Simon's, that was a catastrophic loss. That went to the same reinsurance market. If the reinsurance market is struggling, and I want to make sure you can hear me, um, if the reinsurance market is getting walloped, then all insurance is struggling. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I got a window up that said Zoom something or another. We're both struggling with Zoom today. Um, and so, insurance is the biggest obstacle to buying a boat for buyers, but sellers have to understand what the buyers are going through. So when someone contacts me about buying a boat, and hiring me as a buyer broker, the first thing I ask about is what is your ownership experience? Because a lot of the insurance companies, almost all of them, went to this rule of we won't insure you for more than 10 to 12 foot larger than the largest boat you've ever owned. And we don't want boats that are 20 years or older. Some have backed off of that. Now they're starting to, allow captain training. We'll insure you if you hire a captain for 10, 20, 30, 40 hours, whatever it might be, um, and they sign off that you're capable of operating the boat. They're also starting to look at resumes again, a few. Last season, hurricane season, helped because we didn't have, such outrageous losses. We're hoping this season will be okay, but now they're claiming it's going to be a super uh, El Nino. So, the insurance companies are kind of like, well, we need to pad our pockets to get ready for a bad season. So we're not getting, the flexible insurance policies that we were getting years ago. So, keep that in mind on insurance. That's the first thing to deal with before trying to travel around and see boats.
I have from Neil Cabot a question again. He sees the benefit of a dual agency from a broker's perspective, and that you don't need to split the commission. Do brokers ever reduce their commissions to bridge a gap between buyer and seller expectations?
Some do and some don't. I've had, brokerage firms who said, no, we will not reduce our commission when they represented the buyer because we'll just go and find another boat. I've had brokers, and in fact, I've been in the position of telling a seller I would not reduce my commission because there were condition issues, and I didn't feel it was fair for me to compensate for the seller's lack of maintenance, when it was pretty blatant. But if I can help put a deal together, absolutely. We've done that many, many, many times. Um, if I sense I've had clients, honestly, that came to me and the primary objective was how much commission I was making. And that was kind of their obsession. And I just felt it wasn't the right match because their focus was in the wrong area. I felt they should be focusing on finding the right boat at the right price. And if we have to negotiate commission, we'll do that to help a deal. And other brokers are willing to. But there are definitely brokers that aren't. They feel, they've got a listing that they can sell very easily. And remember, just because a broker's in a dual agency relationship doesn't mean they're always automatically getting, a full 10% commission from a seller. They may have had to negotiate that commission down because they are representing both parties. And some sellers are like, look, I don't want you reducing your commission because I want, full service. I want you fully engaged in this. And, just you're going to earn your full commission. So get the job done. Have I lost you again? Sorry, boy, oh boy, I'm right in the
Yeah,
middle of town with a strong signal.
I,
Are you there?
yeah, there you go. Yeah, there you go.
Yep.
This has been really good. Now, one thing that everyone's probably interested in, what's the current market look like? Um,
Now the negative part. Um, so in 2025, the market was down 8 to 12%, depending on who calculated and who you spoke to. But that's a pretty good range of, where the market was in 2025. That's new and used power and sale, the overall market. Power was down almost 8%, and sale was down almost 15%. The sailboat market is just really, really difficult because so many owners are aging out of sailboats, either going to the dark side to a trawler or a motor yacht, or getting out of boating totally. The younger people are not stepping up and buying the sailboats as much as the baby boomers, have in the past. There are so many sailboats on the market, especially older sailboats. Your high-end sailboats are doing better, of course. They always do. The well-known brands, and the ones that are considered higher quality. But overall, the market is down. It's taking longer to get boats sold. Um, but in saying all that, I'll use a powerboat example, the main ship 400 trawler, 40 foot. I have, prior to COVID and the run up in price, 2004 40-foot main ship would sell between 160 to 165,000. I could just tell you what the boat was worth, what it would sell for, and it would sell for that. It was just pretty steady. Then COVID hits and those become worth 250 to 300,000. Then COVID's over and the market drifts down, not crashes, but drifts down. And that same boat is selling in the 200,000 range. Recently, one sold for full asking price at 267,000. It was a non-brokerage deal, a buyer and seller together. I can picture the buyer was excited, didn't have access to sold comps, loved the boat, saw the upgrades, and said, "I'll pay the price." That is happening out there, but it's the needle in the haystack buyer. So sellers shouldn't count on that happening. And buyers, are going to still come in and negotiate. I have buyers that are saying, just Google, what is the boat market like? And you'll see people making predictions, especially on dear old Facebook. The world's coming to an end. The market's crashing. Offer half price, and any seller will accept your half price offer. Nonsense like that. We are selling boats. We're actually the second half of 2025 started to pick up a little bit, and 2026, although I haven't seen a lot of numbers yet, the first quarter, I think I just saw something come across that it was still down, but probably not as much as 2025. We've been very busy. There is definitely demand. There are definitely there are buyers out there, not as many buyers, but they're dragging their feet. They're really analyzing. They're really thinking it through. They're looking at a lot of boats before they make a decision. There's not a lot of you know quick decisions or emotional buying as much. People are definitely holding back, waiting to see what's happening in the world and in the country, and whatever excuses there are out there to just not make a decision. But sadly, I also see people telling me, look, my sister just died of cancer, or my brother just had a heart attack, or my best friend, just whatever. Life goes on. I got to get out there and buy a boat. So they're motivated. They buy a boat. So uh, overall, the market's slow, but boats are selling. You've got to have the condition as best you can, and you've got to be realistic in your expectations as a buyer. The other thing I'm noticing, normally in a slow market, inventory backs way up and prices come way down. Like I just said, prices really haven't in a lot of cases. Sailboat market, they've come down more, but the powerboat market, in a lot of cases, they haven't. Part of that is the Great Loop. The marketing of that has drawn so many new buyers into the market, but the from pricing, people are holding their boats longer. They're not putting them on the market as often. So I'm seeing sellers say, well, normally we would have bought a bigger boat by now, or a different type of boat, or a newer boat, or a different layout, but we're going to stick with what we have because we look at the pricing and we really can't find what we want. And we look at the interest rates because we want to borrow money on a newer boat, and the interest rates are higher than what we're paying now. So we're just going to sit tight and keep enjoying our cruising and just wait this out. So you're not seeing as much inventory in a lot of boats. And I'm sure some people listening will attest to that if they are very specific about a brand and model they're looking for and they're not finding it yet.
Well, Curtis, this has been really very, very helpful, I think. Let's stop the share here. And I want to thank you for attending and
Thank you.
presenting. And everyone who's attending will get um, a recording, a link, and a copy of the slides if they're interested. Anyone who's interested in further information, of course, reach out to Curtis. He answers
Absolutely.
the phone. He answers the phone. There is no AI in his phone system. And I apologize for just having a powerboat on our slides. However, my graphics person used AI. And when they got the slides to me, I realized there were no sailboats. But anyway, they did do everything they were supposed to do. It's just the wrong boat type. Not the wrong boat type, but for our audience, we have sailboat and trawler and power. But Curtis, thank you very much. I want to thank everyone who's attending. Does anyone else have any questions? We answered questions. I don't see anything in the chat.
If anyone does, Joan, they're welcome to contact me anytime. I don't like to get involved when, in another broker's transaction. I don't feel it's fair. But if I can help someone out answering a question, by all means, I'll give any guidance I can, especially to SSCA members.
Thank you very much and have a good evening. And thank everyone for attending. It's appreciated. I hope that the transmission audio was not a problem. And what is Curtis's address and phone? Curtis, I can put the slides up or I will send those out um, to everyone who's attended.
Sure, that's fine. Or you just Google Curtis Stokes and we come right up. I made sure of that.
Curtis Stokes, Stokes, and it's
But if anyone wants it right now, it's 954-684-0218, and it's Curtis at curtisstokes.net.
thank you very much, Curtis.
Thank
Again,
you
you're
all.
honest and it's appreciated. We've been friends
Thank
for
you.
years. Thank you. Bye bye. Good night,
Bye
everyone.
bye.